Papoose is the wealthiest man that I've been with. And that's like no faking. I haven't paid for a flight, a hotel, a fucking purse, nothing, and I don't know how long.
Everybody thought they had this story figured out. The internet loves a simple narrative. One person is the villain, one person is the victim, and the truth sits neatly in between. But this time, fans say this story feels darker, messier, and way more calculated than anyone expected. Because according to reports circulating online, what looked like a messy love triangle might actually be something much bigger, something that people are now calling a long-term scheme hiding in plain sight. For months, social media watched this situation unfold like a slow-burning reality show. Clips went viral, comments exploded, timelines...
And you over there playing with that girl. You over there playing with her. If I thought she would believe it and would listen or even care, because anytime somebody's gonna say like, yeah, they told me what the situation was and I accepted it.
Filled up with screenshots, side eyes, and wait a minute moments. Fans weren't just gossiping anymore, they were connecting dots. And once those dots lined up, the picture made people uncomfortable. Whispers started spreading that this wasn't just about romance.
Oh, I'm never gonna stop talking about my man. I just brought him his food in the back because he was upstairs. Ain't that y'all joke? Oh, he's upstairs. Just brought him his food. And y'all talking shit, but guess what? Ain't nobody gonna ever make me stop talking about my man. That's what y'all think y'all gonna do. You're not gonna do it. Whenever I feel like saying Papoose's name, I'm gonna say his name.
Jealousy, or broken trust. It was about money. A lot of money. People began asking the same question over and over again. How does someone go from being fiercely independent to publicly saying they pay for everything? Flights, hotels, food, luxury gifts. No hesitation, no shame. Fans replayed those clips again and again, and suddenly they sounded different. What once felt like bragging now felt like a warning nobody noticed in time. Then came the claims. Not facts, not court documents, just reports, commentary, and online speculation that refused to die down. Allegations that a powerful boxer's earnings were quietly being redirected. Accusations that someone she trusted was benefiting far more than anyone realized. And the most explosive part? People saying this wasn't accidental, that it was planned, from the very beginning. Emotions ran high as fans debated whether this was love, manipulation, or something in between. Some defended fiercely, saying real relationships look different behind closed doors. Others weren't buying it. They pointed to unresolved marriages, public arguments that felt staged, and sudden business deals that raised eyebrows. Fans are shocked because the story keeps changing, and every new detail seems to make things murkier, not clearer. Now the internet is watching closely. Every post, every appearance, every silence. Because if these reports are even partly true, then this isn't just another celebrity scandal. It's a cautionary tale about power, vulnerability, and what happens when love, loyalty, and money collide under the spotlight. At first, nobody questioned it. When people saw them together, it looked like another unexpected celebrity pairing that the internet would gossip about for a few weeks and then move on from. Fans joked, critics rolled their eyes, and supporters defended the situation like they always do. But slowly, the tone shifted. Little comments started standing out. Small details that once seemed harmless suddenly felt heavy when replayed in people's minds. This wasn't coming from one rumor page or one messy blogger. It was coming from multiple corners of the internet at the same time. Fans began revisiting old interviews and live stream moments, not because they were looking for dirt, but because something about the dynamic felt off. There were moments where laughter felt forced, and moments where praise sounded rehearsed. People noticed how often money came up, not in a discreet way, but openly. Statements about paying for everything, about handling all the expenses, about never having to worry because someone else had it covered. At the time, those comments were brushed off as confidence or generosity. Now fans say they sound like clues. What really made emotions run high was how fast roles seemed to change. One moment she was the independent champion, the face of discipline and hard-earned success. The next, she was publicly centering her life around a man whose career had been relatively quiet for years. Fans didn't say it out loud at first, but they felt it. Why does it look like he's suddenly everywhere? Why does it feel like her world is now revolving around him? Online commentators started pointing out how visibility works in celebrity culture. Attention is currency. Proximity to success often brings opportunities that talent alone could not. Fans noted that stages, events, and high-profile spaces that once belonged to her were now being shared. People weren't accusing anyone yet, but curiosity had turned into suspicion, and suspicion, once planted, grows fast. Then came the talk about business. Deals that sounded impressive on paper, partnerships that were framed as groundbreaking, press conferences filled with gratitude and praise. Fans applauded at first, celebrating a win for women in sports. But after the applause faded, questions crept in. Who really benefits from these deals? Who controls the money? Who takes a cut before the fighter ever sees a dollar? Fans started learning about percentages, management fees,
promotional cuts, and how quickly big numbers shrink once everyone gets paid. This is where the conversation changed completely. People weren't just talking about love anymore. They were talking about leverage. They were talking about influence. They were talking about how easy it is for someone emotionally invested to trust the wrong person with the wrong kind of power. Emotions ran high as fans debated whether this was a mutually beneficial partnership or something far more unbalanced. Friends of the situation, at least those speaking through social media comments and vague posts, seemed divided. Some hinted that everything was fine and that outsiders should mind their business. Others posted cryptic messages about loyalty, betrayal, and learning lessons the hard way. Fans dissected every emoji, every caption, every like. Nothing felt random anymore. The most explosive chatter came when old tensions resurfaced. Unresolved marriages, public arguments that never truly ended. Words spoken in anger months ago suddenly felt prophetic. Fans replayed those moments where accusations were thrown out casually, almost as jokes. Now those jokes didn't sound funny. They sounded like warnings that nobody took seriously at the time. People began saying that if you step back and look at the timeline, things line up too perfectly to ignore. The timing of the relationship, the timing of the deals, the timing of public fallouts. Nothing felt accidental anymore. Fans are shocked because what once looked like chaos now looks coordinated in hindsight. And that realization made the story feel less like messy drama and more like a calculated move. Still, supporters pushed back hard. They argued that strong women can choose their partners freely, that love doesn't always look logical from the outside, that success attracts opportunists and critics alike. They said people were projecting narratives on a situation they didn't understand. And for a moment, that argument held weight, until the money conversations kept coming back. Online discussions started focusing on financial responsibility. Tax issues were mentioned, debts were whispered about. Again, nothing confirmed, nothing proven. Just reports, commentary, and speculation spreading faster than facts ever could. Fans debated whether it was fair to connect these dots, or whether it was dangerous to do so. The family, at least as the internet sees it, was left divided between those who believed the worst and those who refused to believe anything at all. What makes this story stick isn't proof, it's pattern, it's repetition. It's the feeling that too many things point in the same direction. Fans don't say this with certainty, they say it with concern. Concern for someone they watched grow from a determined young athlete into a global champion. Concern that fame, love, and trust might be blurring lines that should never blur when money is involved. And as the commentary keeps growing, one thing becomes clear. This story is no longer just about who is dating who. It's about power dynamics. It's about who controls the narrative, who benefits from silence, and who pays the price when emotions override caution. Fans are watching closely now, not because they want drama, but because they fear how this kind of story usually ends. At first, nobody questioned it. When the internet saw them together, it looked like just another unexpected pairing that would trend for a few days and then fade away. Fans joked about it, critics dismissed it, and supporters rushed in to defend it. Everything felt loud but harmless. But slowly, something shifted. Comments that once felt casual started to sound strange when replayed. Moments that were supposed to feel romantic or supportive began to feel awkward to some viewers. And the more people watched, the more they felt like they were missing something hiding just beneath the surface. Fans started pulling up old clips, not out of malice but curiosity. Live streams, interviews, random moments where emotion spilled out without polish. In those clips, money kept coming up in ways that felt unusual. Statements about paying for everything were said proudly, almost defiantly. Flights, hotels, food, gifts, nothing off limits. At the time, people clapped and called it boss energy. Now fans say it sounded less like confidence and more like a quiet admission that the balance in the relationship was already leaning too far in one direction. What really raised eyebrows was how quickly his presence became constant. Suddenly, he wasn't just a partner, he was everywhere. Backstage, front row, center stage, in business meetings, in press conferences, fans began asking questions they hadn't thought to ask before. How did this happen so fast? Why does it feel like her world suddenly revolves around him? And why does his visibility rise every time her star shines brighter? Online commentary exploded as people discussed how celebrity dynamics work. Proximity to success can revive careers. Association can open doors that talent alone could not. Fans weren't accusing anyone yet, but they were observing patterns. The attention followed him wherever she went. The spotlight widened just enough to include him every time. And once fans noticed it, they couldn't unsee it. Then came the business talk. Announcements about deals sounded massive. Numbers were thrown around that made headlines. Supporters celebrated, saying this was long overdue recognition. But after the excitement settled, people began breaking down the details. Management percentages, promotional cuts, fees stacked on top of fees. Fans realized that big contracts don't always mean big paydays once everyone takes their share. And that realization changed the entire tone of the conversation. Emotions ran high as people debated whether this was smart strategy or a dangerous setup. Some argued that every champion needs a team and that trust is essential. Others said trust without boundaries is how people get hurt. Comments flooded timelines, with fans splitting into camps almost overnight. One side insisted this was love and partnership. The other side whispered that it looked like control. Friends and associates, at least as far as social media suggested, seemed uneasy. Vague posts about loyalty appeared. Captions about learning lessons surfaced without context. Nothing direct, nothing provable, but enough to fuel speculation. Fans dissected everything. A deleted tweet, an unfollow, a cryptic story post. Nothing felt accidental anymore. The tension deepened when old conflicts resurfaced. Unresolved relationships that were never fully closed off. Arguments from the past that suddenly felt relevant again. Fans replayed moments where harsh words were spoken in anger and brushed off at the time. Now those words felt heavy, almost prophetic. People started saying maybe the signs were always there and nobody wanted to see them. Supporters pushed back hard against the growing narrative. They said people were projecting. They said strong women are always questioned when they choose their partners. They said the internet loves tearing down happiness. And for a while those defenses held, until the money conversations refused to stop. Reports began circulating. Not official statements, not confirmed documents, but claims that spread quickly. Talk of debts, talk of financial pressure, talk of obligations that didn't disappear just because public perception changed. Fans debated whether it was fair to connect these rumors or irresponsible to repeat them. Still, the chatter grew louder by the day. What unsettled people most was how neatly everything seemed to line up when placed on a timeline. The relationship, the deals, the sudden shift in public image. Fans are shocked because chaos now looked organized in hindsight. Not proven, not confirmed, just suspiciously aligned. This story stopped being about romance and turned into something heavier. It became about power, influence, and what happens when emotional trust intersects with financial control. Fans didn't claim certainty, they expressed concern. Concern for someone they watched rise through discipline and sacrifice. Concern that success might be making her vulnerable in ways nobody wants to acknowledge. And as the commentary continued to spread, one thing became clear. People weren't watching for entertainment anymore. They were watching because they fear how stories like this usually end when nobody asks the hard questions early enough. Once the conversation reached that point, the internet did what it always does and went deeper. Fans started laying everything out side by side, not to prove anything, but to understand it. Timelines were recreated in comment sections. Screenshots were compared. People asked not what they wanted to believe, but what the pattern suggested. And the pattern, according to online commentary, raised even more uncomfortable questions. The biggest shift came when fans stopped focusing on emotions and started focusing on structure. Relationships are one thing, but business arrangements are another. People began asking who signed what, who managed whom, and who benefited the most from these new partnerships. Deals that once sounded empowering were now being described as complicated. Fans talked about how easy it is for athletes to get trapped in contracts they do not fully control, especially when trust replaces caution. Online commentators explained how management and promotion deals work in plain language for regular viewers. Percentages here, commissions there, expenses deducted before payouts. Suddenly that massive number everyone celebrated didn't look so massive anymore. Fans said it felt like watching someone do all the work while multiple hands waited to collect before she ever got paid. Emotions ran high as people argued over whether this was standard practice or a red flag waving right in front of everyone. The narrative grew more intense.
When people brought up how dependent the setup seemed to be, fans pointed out that the entire operation appeared to revolve around her presence and her success. Events, appearances, and promotions all traced back to her name. Some viewers said it felt like too much pressure was resting on one person's shoulders. Others claimed that pressure was exactly what made the situation ripe for exploitation. Friends and supporters continued to post mixed signals online. Some praised teamwork and loyalty. Others hinted at disappointment and regret without naming names. Fans watched carefully, reading between the lines. Every vague post became evidence to someone. Every silence became suspicious to someone else. The family, at least in the eyes of the internet, was left divided not by facts, but by belief. Then the financial rumors grew louder. Again, not confirmed, not documented, but repeated often enough to stick. Talk of unpaid obligations, talk of money problems lingering in the background. Fans debated whether it was fair to even discuss these things. Some said it was invasive. Others argued that public figures invite scrutiny when their private lives become public spectacle. Either way, the conversation was no longer avoidable. What shocked many viewers was how openly money had been discussed before. Fans replayed clips where generosity was celebrated, where covering expenses was worn like a badge of honor. Those same clips now felt different in this new context. Fans said it no longer sounded like love, it sounded like imbalance, and imbalance, in their eyes, is where control often begins. Supporters continued to defend the relationship fiercely. They said love doesn't look the same for everyone. They said success doesn't erase the need for companionship. They said people were ignoring the agency of a grown woman. Those arguments were echoed loudly and passionately. But the opposing side wasn't talking about choice anymore. They were talking about leverage. The discussion turned darker when people started mentioning past warnings. Comments made long ago that were brushed aside as bitterness or jealousy. Fans said those comments deserved another look, not because they were automatically true, but because they lined up too well with what was happening now. Emotions ran high as people argued over whether those past words were cruel attacks or overlooked truths. Another twist came when fans questioned why certain ties were never fully severed. Unresolved relationships lingered in the background of the story, creating confusion. People wondered why public conflicts felt performative at times, why arguments erupted online but were followed by appearances that suggested unity behind the scenes. Fans said it felt like watching a scripted show where everyone knew their role except the audience. At this point, the story took on a life of its own. Reaction videos multiplied. Commentary channels dissected every detail. Some creators warned viewers to take everything with caution. Others leaned into the drama, framing it as a cautionary tale. Fans are shocked not because they believe everything, but because the volume of discussion refuses to fade. What made this phase of the story so compelling was the lack of closure. No statements clearing things up, no firm denials, no confirmations. Just silence mixed with visible togetherness that confused people even more. Fans said the silence felt strategic. Others said it felt overwhelmed. Either way, it kept the speculation alive. As more voices joined the conversation, the tone shifted again. This was no longer just gossip. It became a debate about power dynamics in celebrity relationships, about how emotional bonds can complicate financial decisions, about how fame can blur boundaries that should stay firm. People shared stories of athletes and artists who lost everything because they trusted the wrong people at the wrong time. The fear driving this commentary wasn't hatred, it was concern. Concern that someone admired for strength and resilience might be vulnerable in ways fans never expected. Concern that success doesn't protect anyone from manipulation. Concern that by the time clarity arrives, the damage is already done. And by the end of this phase of the discussion, one thing was clear to everyone watching. This story was no longer fading. It was escalating. The questions were getting sharper. The sides were getting louder. And the internet wasn't ready to let go until it felt like the truth, whatever that truth might be, finally surfaced. By the time the discussion reached this stage, the tone online shifted from curiosity to alarm. Fans were no longer debating whether something felt off. They were debating how far it might already have gone. Commentary videos started using words like setup and long game, carefully framed as opinions but heavy enough to spark intense reactions. Emotions ran high because people felt like they were watching a slow-motion mistake unfold.
In real time, one of the most talked about angles was how loyalty was being portrayed publicly. Fans noticed repeated displays of devotion, almost defiant in nature. Statements that sounded like love were now being interpreted as proof of dependence. People replayed moments where support was declared loudly, even aggressively, as if responding to critics rather than expressing genuine affection. Fans said it felt less like reassurance and more like convincing oneself. The internet also started focusing on how criticism was handled. Instead of addressing concerns directly, responses seemed emotional and reactive. Fans pointed out that defensiveness often appears when someone feels cornered. Others argued that anyone would lash out under constant scrutiny. Still, the pattern kept feeding the narrative. Every angry response added fuel. Every emotional outburst became another clip to analyze. Another twist emerged when fans questioned who had access to what. Who handled scheduling? Who negotiated appearances? Who spoke on behalf of whom? Commentators speculated that boundaries between personal and professional roles might be dangerously blurred. When one person becomes partner, manager, spokesperson, and protector all at once, Fans said it creates a power imbalance that rarely ends well. People began sharing past examples from the entertainment world, stories of athletes and artists who trusted partners with finances, only to later discover debts, contracts, and obligations they never fully understood. These comparisons weren't made as accusations, but as warnings. Fans weren't saying history was repeating itself, they were saying it often rhymes. The conversation grew more uncomfortable when mental and emotional vulnerability entered the chat. Some fans expressed concern that years of intense competition, pressure, and physical toll could affect judgment. This sparked heated debate. Supporters called it insulting. Critics said ignoring vulnerability is how exploitation happens. The family was left divided, with both sides accusing the other of crossing lines. Meanwhile, silence from certain people involved became louder than any statement could have been. Fans watched closely for clarifications that never came. Instead, they saw continued closeness, continued appearances, continued praise. To some, this proved everything was fine. To others, it confirmed that the situation was too tangled to address publicly. Another layer of drama came from unresolved legal and financial whispers. Again, nothing confirmed, but repeated enough to dominate comment sections. People debated responsibility. If someone is legally tied to another person, where does obligation end and choice begin? Fans argued over whether helping someone financially is noble or reckless, depending on context. At the same time, critics of the narrative warned about the danger of internet pylons. They said speculation can turn into character assassination quickly. They reminded viewers that commentary is not evidence. These voices were present, but often drowned out by the louder, drama-driven takes. Controversy, as always, traveled faster than caution. What made this phase particularly tense was how personal it felt to fans. This wasn't just any celebrity. This was someone many people admired for grit, discipline, and perseverance. Seeing her portrayed as vulnerable or possibly misled struck a nerve. Emotions ran high because fans felt protective, even if they didn't fully agree with each other. Online arguments became more aggressive. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. One side accused the other of jealousy and misogyny. The other accused supporters of ignoring obvious red flags. Neither side budged. The story had become less about facts and more about belief. Then came the moments that really unsettled people. Brief slips in interviews, awkward pauses, body language that viewers read as discomfort. Again, interpretation ruled everything. But once enough people pointed it out, those moments became impossible to ignore. Fans said it felt like watching someone trapped between loyalty and self-preservation. As speculation grew, some creators shifted tone, urging caution while still discussing the situation. They framed it as a lesson rather than an accusation, a reminder of how quickly success can attract complicated relationships, how love can blur boundaries, how money changes dynamics even when intentions start pure. Still, the core question refused to go away. If all of this is just noise, why does it align so neatly? Fans said coincidences exist, but patterns tell stories. And this pattern, whether real or imagined, felt too detailed to dismiss easily. By now, the narrative had fully evolved. It was no longer just about romance or business. It was about autonomy, about whether someone at the top of their field could still be steered in directions that benefited others more than themselves. Fans are shocked because the idea itself
challenges everything they believed about strength and independence. And as the conversation reached its most intense point yet, one thing became undeniable. This story was not calming down. It was building toward something, a confrontation, a revelation, or perhaps a quiet realization behind closed doors. Whatever the outcome, the internet felt certain of one thing. The situation, as it stood, could not continue without consequences. By the time the discussion reached what many fans now call the point of no return, the tone online changed yet again. It was no longer loud outrage or chaotic speculation. It became quiet concern. People stopped arguing just to win and started asking what happens next when situations like this stay unresolved for too long. Fans said this was the stage where stories usually split into two paths. Either clarity arrives and everyone recalibrates, or silence stretches until the damage is already done. Commentary channels began slowing their delivery, choosing words more carefully. They reminded viewers that none of this was confirmed, that these were reports, reactions, and interpretations. Yet even with disclaimers, the weight of the narrative felt heavy. Fans felt like they were watching someone stand in the middle of competing loyalties, with every step forward pulling them further from solid ground. Some viewers noticed subtle changes in behavior that added to the unease. Appearances felt more guarded, smiles seemed tighter, moments of joy looked rehearsed rather than spontaneous. Again, interpretation ruled everything,
But once enough people noticed the same thing, it became part of the story, whether it was fair or not. Emotions ran high because people wanted reassurance and weren't getting it. Others focused on the idea of sunk cost. Fans discussed how difficult it is to walk away once time, money, and pride are invested. Admitting a mistake publicly can feel worse than staying silent and pushing forward. People shared personal stories in comment sections, explaining how they ignored warning signs because leaving felt like losing everything they built. Those stories resonated deeply and gave the situation a more human dimension. There was also a growing conversation about isolation. Fans wondered whether success had unintentionally narrowed the circle of people who could speak honestly. When fame grows, criticism often gets filtered out. Loyalty becomes confused with agreement. Fans said they worried that voices offering caution might not be getting through anymore, replaced instead by praise that feels safer but less helpful. Meanwhile, supporters of the relationship and business setup continued to stand firm. They argue that outsiders don't understand private arrangements. They said teamwork can look messy from the outside. They insisted that strength includes choosing who to trust and standing by that choice even under pressure. These voices were steady and consistent, and they prevented the narrative from becoming one-sided. But even among defenders, cracks appeared. Some acknowledged that the optics were bad, even if the reality wasn't. Others admitted that clear communication might calm the storm. The family was left divided not just between critics and supporters, but within each group itself. Nobody fully agreed on what the right move should be. The internet also began preparing itself for outcomes. Some fans predicted a public statement that would address everything head-on. Others believed the situation would quietly dissolve without explanation. A few thought the truth would only emerge years later, long after attention moved on. This anticipation kept people watching closely, scanning for hints of what direction things might go. What made this stage of the story so unsettling was how familiar it felt. Fans said they had seen versions of this before. Talented individuals surrounded by complicated relationships, blurred lines between love and business, early warnings ignored because everything still looked successful on the surface. Those stories rarely end with celebration. They usually end with lessons learned the hard way. Still, there was hope woven into the commentary. Hope that awareness itself could change the outcome. Fans said that public concern, even when imperfect, can sometimes protect people from further harm. They hoped that conversations happening online might encourage reflection behind closed doors. Not confrontation, but clarity. As the noise continued, some creators urged viewers to shift focus from blame to empowerment. They talked about the importance of independent advisors, about separating emotion from contracts, about protecting oneself even while in love. These messages resonated with viewers who wanted something constructive to come from the chaos. Yet the unresolved questions lingered. Who truly benefits the most from this arrangement? Where do boundaries begin and end? And how much of what fans see is genuine versus carefully
managed? Without answers, speculation filled the gaps, as it always does. What kept this story alive was not outrage, but uncertainty. The feeling that something important was at stake and still undecided. Fans are shocked not because they believe every claim, but because the situation highlights how quickly admiration can turn into concern when transparency disappears. By this point, the narrative had fully transformed into a cautionary tale, not about villains and victims, but about complexity, about how strength does not make anyone immune to influence, about how success can create new vulnerabilities instead of eliminating old ones. And as the main body of this story settles into a tense pause, the internet waits, not for drama, but for direction, for reassurance that hard-earned success is being protected, not compromised. Whether that reassurance comes publicly or privately remains unknown, but one thing is certain to everyone watching. The conversation has changed, and whatever happens next will be shaped by the questions being asked right now. Now it all comes down to what you think. After hearing these reports, reactions, and online commentary, the question isn't whether this story is true or false. The real question is why so many people are seeing the same patterns and raising the same concerns at the same time. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the internet clearly isn't ready to move on yet. You've seen how quickly admiration can turn into worry when money, power, and relationships mix in the public eye. You've seen how silence can sometimes speak louder than explanations. And you've seen how stories like this don't need confirmation to spark serious conversations about trust, boundaries, and control. None of this is being presented as fact. These are reports, opinions, and interpretations circulating online, and that's exactly why your perspective matters. Do you think people are reading too much into this situation, or do you believe these reports point to something deeper that deserves attention? Is this just another example of the internet overreacting? Or could it be a warning sign that fans shouldn't ignore? Some viewers see love and loyalty.
Others see imbalance and risk. Where do you stand? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let everyone know what you think about this situation. Do you believe the concerns are valid, or do you think this is all blown out of proportion? Your voice adds to the conversation, and right now, this conversation is far from over. If you want to stay updated on stories like this, make sure you like this video so it reaches more people who are following this drama closely. Subscribe to the channel for more commentary on trending celebrity news, internet reactions, and viral stories that everyone is talking about but nobody fully understands.